So hello, everyone. My name is Rebecca Kochenderfer. I am your host for this call. I'm the senior editor and co-founder of Homeschool.com. And for this next hour, we're going to be speaking with Diane Flynn Keith. Diane has homeschooled her two sons for 14 years in California. She is the editor of Homefires.com, HOMEFIRES.com. She is also the author of Car Schooling, which we mentioned in our last interview, a terrific book. Since a lot of your homeschooling will probably take place in the car, you're going to love this resource. She is also the publisher of Click Schooling. And we asked Diane to come today to speak about socialization because she appeared as an expert witness in a court trial where it was a homeschooling case, and the big question was socialization. I'll ask Diane to tell you a little bit more about that, but she's done some fascinating research, which I think you'll find very helpful. So welcome, Diane, and thank you so much for being with us today.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So you were then employed as an expert witness in this trial case, and the big issue was socialization. Is that correct?
Correct, yes. It was, as is typical in these kinds of cases, it was a custody case with divorcing parents, and one parent wanted to continue to homeschool the child, the other parent did not. And the other parent's main reasons were they didn't feel that the child would be properly socialized without going to school, which, of course, in homeschooling, Rebecca, we hear all the time. This is the eternal, question and the eternal myth as far as I'm concerned. What about socialization?
So the real answer for that, which we'll get to, the answer is yes, I'm doing it for socialization reasons, right?
Yeah. If you really start to take a look at how the schools are socializing our kids, I think a lot of people come to homeschooling precisely because of the desocialization taking place on school campuses.
Well, let's talk a little bit, please. What is socialization? How do you define it?
Well, I always, when I give my Homeschool 101 presentations where we talk about all of the different aspects of homeschooling, the nuts and bolts as people are getting started, I always like to address this question by saying that the American Heritage Dictionary defines socialization as to bring under government control. That is the literal definition taken right from the dictionary.
Really? To bring under government control?
To bring under government control. Wow. And if that's what we mean by socialization, then I think our critics are right. Homeschoolers are not likely to be well socialized in that sense. But certainly their school-going counterparts are. I think more often what people mean is how will our homeschoolers learn to be civilized, or in other words, how are they going to learn the skills to get along with other people? How will the children learn to compete in the big wide world? How will they find opportunities to work and play and learn and even compete with other people in homeschooling? So I think that's generally what parents are concerned about when they ask that question, what about socialization?
Well, why do people think that the schools are going to give our children those skills?
I'm not really clear other than the fact that schools provide opportunities where lots and lots of children are together. So by virtue of the fact that you have a place where all the children are together on a regular basis, day in and day out, then a lot of people often think that will result in socialization. But I think if you take a look at what really happens in the school classroom and on the school campus, you can really start to pull this apart a little bit and understand that socialization in the sense of, people interacting and getting along is not really what's taking place in school. How do schools socialize children? Well, they stay in a class. They learn to stay in the class to which they've been assigned. In other words, children in school are grouped according to their age and academic track, Rebecca. You know that. It doesn't happen again at any other time in our life where we're all stuck in the same classroom, the same four walls, at 8 hours a day with people who are the exact same age on the exact same academic track, who generally come from the same geographic area and from the same socioeconomic backgrounds as we do. So that sense is very artificial. It's not like the real world at all. And schools constantly say that by virtue of that environment, they are preparing kids for the real world. And I would sincerely argue with that point.
Well, now, in the schools, aren't they training the children to kind of be passive and compliant?
Of course. That's another big part of socialization.
I mean, so if we're saying the definition of socialization, what people really mean it to be is good people skills. So are children going to be able to develop good people skills within a school setting?
Well, getting back to what you just said about being passive and compliant, I mean, what does that mean? Does that mean that the kids have to submit themselves to bullying and harassment by other kids in the classroom? If someone hits, if you look at that in the real world, if you keep sort of comparing and contrasting school world versus real world, if someone hits you when you're an adult, they're arrested. If someone steals your lunch money, they get arrested. Adults in the real world choose their friends from among people who have similar interests and who are hopefully civilized and treat them well. They have the choice to leave or get away if they don't like it, which is not at all like in a school. And school conditions our kids to respond to the bell and other kinds of reflexive commands. You're taught to do what you're told. You're taught to mistrust your own judgment. And the more you distrust it, the worse your own judgment becomes. And I also like to take issue with this whole idea that, school is a place to socialize as into, have nurture friendships and things, and that you can chat whenever you want to. I recall distinctly that my son spent a great deal of his time in class in the first grade with his head down on his desk because he wanted to talk all the time to all his little friends around him, and the teacher kept saying, "We're not here to socialize, young man."
My 14-year-old, who's been homeschooled his whole life, tried school recently, and he was very surprised at how many unhappy kids there were there. And like you said, how much bullying had went on, because for some kids it's a 12-year prison sentence. And like you said, in the real world, if you're in a job where you're unhappy or the other people are mean to you, you wouldn't work at that job anymore. You have the choice to leave, but when you're in a high school environment, a school environment, a lot of times those kids don't have any choice.
That's absolutely right.
They're there whether they want to be there or not.
Yeah, and the analogy to prison, I think, is dead on, Rebecca.
Yes.
And not only that, but now, the place where kids actually did have an opportunity to socialize, it wasn't in the classroom because, of course, you're punished if you try to socialize in the classroom. So you got to socialize out on, in the yard during recess. Well, now that's become a dangerous place as well because there just isn't staff to supervise what happens and takes place in the yard. And not only that, but many schools now are saying the kids need more time to study, so they're removing recess time. So, and it's happening in various school districts throughout the country.
I know for some grandparents, too, and for some people, when they use the word socialization, what they mean is the school of hard knocks.
Yeah.
How is your child going to grow up to function in the world if they don't go through the school of hard knocks?
Yeah,
When you homeschool your children, you're choosing. They're taking college classes or they're taking group classes. They've chosen to be there. The other children have chosen to be there. Just more like the real world, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't, this idea that you should expect to have your kids put up with bad treatment, from, in the name of toughening them up, I think is a serious misconception. I think, if you compare this to the real world, if they learn to do that, to put up with bullies, to take abuse, then they learn to ignore miserable bosses and abusive spouses later in life. In real life, if an employer discovered that an employee was harassing the other coworkers, that employee could be suspended or fired or relocated. And in real life, you're not harassed and bullied by a coworker. And if you are, you can seek legal recourse independently. In a classroom, a child is really powerless. And I think that's the key here is this issue of powerlessness and allowing somebody else to usurp your own authority for what you know is right and true for yourself in terms of your values and your beliefs. And little kids need to be empowered. They're not going to be empowered in a school setting. And kids who develop in homeschooling, they develop self-confidence and self-esteem, and they learn how to deal with difficult people and difficult situations when they're developmentally ready to do that. And then when they have the self-confidence to act independently, they can go out into their extended families, the community at large, and out into the big real world and feel like that they have control over their situation and that they have the choice, independent choices. and you get that, you develop that foundation